This woman was brutally murdered for about 2 hours. She was hit over 60 times with a baseball bat and then they beat her head against a tree. Later on in the colony, the murderers were recruited into the PMC Wagner and then simply returned home. This is the story of 2 participants of the so-called special military operation, Dmitry Fursov and Sviatoslav Belousov. There are many soldiers with such criminal records in the Russian army. To cover up for losses, the Russian Defense Ministry recruits rapists, murderers and cannibals from prisons.
This is how the common responsibility through blood is formed. Participation in the war itself guarantees the loyalty of the authorities and the national leader towards former soldiers. On the other hand, there is the expectation that it will ensure the loyalty of people who have gone through the war and have been stained with blood. Dmitry Dubrovsky, lecturer at the Faculty of Social Sciences at Charles University, in an interview with Voice of America. Indeed, there are many convicts fighting in this war, those who don't want to sit in prison. And further on, they are marginalized people from poor regions with criminal tendencies. They have felt blood in Ukraine and they can no longer stop. These phenomena are not unique only for this war, and what makes the situation worse is that being completely desperate, Putin had to throw criminals to the front. Many of them, of course, mostly died, but many returned. Thus, he jeopardized not only the lives of peaceful Ukrainians, but also the health of the Russians themselves.
Russians often commit crimes after returning from the front. Participation in the war against Ukraine is a mitigating circumstance for them. Violence and crime are encouraged both at the local level. For example, a court in the Orenburg region recently acquitted a participant in the Russia's war against Ukraine who stole a television set. And at the highest level, Putin personally conferred the title of Honorable to the 64th Brigade. Members of this unit of the Russian army committed mass murders in Bucha, killing and torturing civilians.
The Kremlin's aggressive war against Ukraine glorifies violence. The soldiers who committed the massacre in Bucha, raping women, killing children and men with their hands tied behind their backs, are being rewarded by Vladimir Putin. And these soldiers go home with the experience of all the crimes they committed. And with that experience, they will live in Russian society. And the consequences will be horrific crimes will continue to be committed in another form in Russia itself. Sabine Fischer, analyst at the Berlin-based Foundation for Science and Policy, in an interview with Deutsche Welle.
Putin has urged not only to pardon, but also to involve the so-called war heroes in running the state. In his address to the Federal Assembly, he announced the Time of Heroes program, which would allow participants in the war against Ukraine unleashed by the Kremlin to take leading positions.
Putin is sincerely convinced that legal regimes are worthless and everything is determined by power, money and influence. Hence, transition to force management is inevitable. According to Putin's logic, it is necessary to build a rigid military hierarchy in power. This fits well with his militaristic thinking. This is how he arrived at the point where the security forces are his backbone. Dmitry Oreshkin, political scientist, in an interview with Voice of America.
Russia is irrevocably turning into a militaristic dictatorial state, analysts say, and they add that the characteristic feature of such a structure is instability.
I hope for Putin himself it will turn out badly in general. This whole criminal adventure of his with the invasion of Ukraine and all the associated crimes. For us it will be a holiday, for them it will be a tragedy. And of course the story with the return of criminals in Russia is only one side of this process. The situation in all areas is starting to get out of control and become more and more unmanageable.
The desire to involve the military in state processes may play a cruel joke with the Kremlin dictator. Experts recall Prigozhin's summer march on Moscow. It failed and ended with the death of Wagner's top brass. But the next march may end much better. Reported by Anastasia Tarnavska, Larisa Zubenko, UATV News.